Доброго дня, шановні пані і панове, вітаю в Українському кризовому медіа-центрі. Нагадую, що згідно розкладу на сьогодні
I would like to greet you in the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. I would like to remind you that today we will be talking to respectable military experts on the downed aircraft and the anti-terrorist operation. Mykola Malomuzh is our first guest, Ukrainian Army General, Head of External Intelligence Service of Ukraine in 2005-2010, member of the National Security and Defense Council 2005-2010, will discuss cessation of military conflict at eastern Ukraine and development of the new economic capacity in the region. I would like to thank you all and this distinguished assembly. I would like to say that indeed we are constantly involved in regulation of the situation and the economic maintenance and security arrangements and the coordination council of military officers, former heads of staffs, commanders of forces, diplomats, lawyers and international experts and experts in international affairs, and there's some practical arrangements on the assignment of President of Ukraine, the government, and we are active in Donetsk and the southern regions, and partially we take part in combats as commanders, commanding officers, consultants, and experts. And from the very beginning, I would like to say that having estimated the situation, we've had meetings here in the Ukraine Crisis Media Center. On numerous occasions, we mentioned that as prerequisites for the crisis, we can observe some developments at earlier stages and central agencies of power, security sector, defense sector, and the special services, secret services had to create effective countermeasures for the Crimea, for prevention of the active phase in the south and the east of our Ukraine, effective actions of secret services of the Russian Federation and mercenaries and professional militants, subversions. And why did it happen? Just a couple of words. When the central agencies were formed, the enforcement bodies were formed in Ukraine, we used the political principle and quota principle, the anti-crisis government of professionals. That principle didn't work, but we tried to use this format to impose it for the Crimean direction and prevention of annexation, and also extremism, first saboteurs and scouts, and then terrorists and separatists in the south and the east. 2.5 months ago, we were pointing to the verge of civil war, full threat of interference from the Russian Federation and intervention, economic, social collapse, and also outreach of separatism, criminal outburst, and terrorism. That was the scenario that was actually observed, and that was said 2.5 months ago. And we wanted to create the anti-crisis staff, and the President of Ukraine knew leaders with a deep and good experience of fighting separatist extremism, military experience and expertise, fighting terrorists with real tens of operations in the Crimea, Transnistria, Chechnya, and abroad. That principle wasn't observed, and the scale was expanding, and now we have this difficult situation. And that scenario also that we anticipated, we chose the most complicated, sophisticated model, the big-scale anti-terrorist operation. But this is a model that is not extremely it's effective, but the casualties are high. We need high-scale military operations, serious coordinated actions of practically all the forces, secret services, reconnaissance, and border guards. In this situation, however, I would like to emphasize that only the complex approach and simultaneous approaches can solve the problem. No military operation, no forceful component can stabilize the situation, by and large, with the prospect of harmonization of relations inside Ukraine. We worked on the 10th of May, the 15 points that were picked up by the President and then announced the international format of talks in Normandy and the four of Germany, France, Ukraine, and the Russian Federation, all military activities and operations in our territory. Partially that was regulated, partially the process started, but no factor out of 15 was realized in a systemic fashion, professional fashion. The reason is that at different stages, practically, we failed to establish the practical mechanism. The will of the Western European democracies wasn't expressed clearly, and accordingly, the pressure mechanism of neutralization, negation of Putin's efforts and his team's efforts, and no operational activities for surrender of the militants and neutralization of terrorists and extremists, especially the mercenaries, and prevention of the flow influx of heavy military equipment and machinery. The border wasn't blocked. Based on this difficult situation that we have now, we can say that we are now approaching the more clear-cut situation to arrive at a comprehensive level of solution, and the most complicated factor is the neutralization of support coming from the Russian Federation to extremist terrorists, militants, use of saboteurs and special force, heavy equipment. We have this extremely difficult situation after the downing of Boeing, and lots of our aircrafts have been downed. So protection of the border, control of the border, and prevention of any movement of equipment and machinery in special operation. When they penetrate, we have to neutralize any element, any group of saboteurs, especially the subversive factors like the units of GRAD and the state-of-the-art equipment with casualties in civilians and our military officers. At this point, we should use the fact that it is important to involve big human resources, intellectual resources, and put it to the President of Ukraine that the format should be changed under the same plan, but with more realistic involvement at the highest political level, at the level of heads of the Ministry of Defense, Security Service of Ukraine, Ministry of Interior, new people for the border guards with this vision and experience that was developed, but the plans were implemented at on a minimal scale with a new contingent of people, military officers with experience of military operations, anti-terrorist operations, and also complicated issues in military conditions and conditions of war, not just for the operations, any involvement. And the third level of mobilization, but 80,000 of people with that kind of experience that are ready for operations are not involved yet, but already in the composition of the structures formed, battalions, regiments, and brigades with effective implementation, good rapport and interplay and interoperability, and equal to the people from the special force from Chechnya who penetrate our territory. Now I would like to break it down by points for the plan of regulation for future activities that we can see at this point. I would like to focus your attention on the fact that it's for development of the points announced by the President. On the other hand, and its involvement of new professionals of high level for implementation, also formation of a new powerful staff at the President of Ukraine for implementation of such tasks. Now, the outer factors, lack of at the strategic and tactical and operational level of coordinated efforts, and that led to bigger scale of destabilization, radicalization, and the special force and competence in the territory of Luhansk and Donetsk. Unfailed strategic designs led to the loss of strategic initiative and mass casualties, also big losses in the civilians, and the tragedy of Malaysian aircraft that led to loss of a high number of people. At the international level, the leadership of Ukraine, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, only partially reduced the number of supporters of the Russian Federation. Some countries of the EU are neutral in that situation. The President of Russia continued his efforts to expansion of the controlled area controlled by terrorists with inclusion of Kiev, and the pressure on France, Germany, and Italy to force them to to force the Ukrainian leadership to stop anti-terrorist operation and have the four quadrilateral with negotiation with the inclusion of Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republic, so-called, and heavy weapons, Grad, Buk, and also armored and also the anti-aircraft units with undermining of the our position with in negotiation with the Russian Federation and the terrorists, and also support of negotiation and preparation of resolution for making a special area controlled by so-called people's representatives, peacekeepers from the Russian Federation. Formation of the legal status of such entities with autonomous of federal units in composition of Ukraine, but practically under control of the Russian Federation as a special factor of pressure on the Ukrainian leadership. It's planned to use the situation with the downed Malaysian aircraft. That was the great pressure.
In case there is no support by the leadership of Ukraine, including OSCE, such actions of Russian Federation, and then they plan to broaden operations with the use of Russian military men and planes, technical missiles, mobile missiles, and other heavy equipment. Clashes with the Russian border guards, broaden intervention through Ukraine, and broader psychological and information war by Russia and other countries. So the leadership of Russia, the Kremlin believes that it will bring to a lot of victims, and that people in Donbass will not be happy, and a lot of military men will not be happy in western and central regions of Ukraine. That will allow to radically ask the question about stopping ATO and or bringing Russian peacekeepers with further strengthening of them in the cost of contingents of OSCE and UN, but they will be under control of the Russian Federation. They are planning to put pressure on the operational level. The President of Russia convinced a number of leaders of OSCE to stop, to cease fire and to have negotiations with the participation of leaders of radical structures. In addition to that, Europeans are provided evidence, fake evidence, that Russians, that the U.S. has a stake in this, and they wanted to, in other words, they would, coming out of this, our council suggests to start a new plan of how to regulate the situation in Ukraine on political level. There should be negotiations with leaders of key countries, EU countries, and countries friendly to Ukraine, and to explain plans of Russian Federation against Ukraine and EU, and to develop an official and an unofficial consolidated position as to Russian Federation. During negotiations with leaders, EU leaders, we should use the following arguments: that the Kremlin has clear plans as to geopolitical control over CIS countries and Eastern Europe, and that can bring to the systemic escalation of tension and between Russian Federation and EU and countries of Black Sea region. And that will influence on the stability of European countries. It will can bring to political, economic, security contradictions in EU. The support of EU to Russia as to that there are illegitimate groups and that will threaten in the east of Ukraine, that will threaten EU countries and threaten with crime, drug traffic, and there will be a problem with oil and gas and transit to Europe. There will be a threat of nuclear security and so many other human-made catastrophes. As a consequence, they can move to EU. Very soon there could be a threat that airspace will be closed between the East and West, and that will bring to a lot of losses in Europe. To prevent negative scenarios and to support stabilization, we suggest to have negotiations between leaders of Germany, France, Ukraine, Russian Federation, and OSCE, except representatives of DNR and to develop a roadmap and to set up a working group to realize that roadmap. And the representatives of OSCE, Germany, and France should be. There should be conditions and practical steps to stop, to ceasefire, and to define conditions for government to give up weapons and to monitor the situation on the border with the participation of FSB, SBU, international services of Russia and Ukraine, monitors from OSCE, from France and Germany, to identify citizens of Russian Federation and other countries that are in Ukraine, like mercenaries, and to send them back to Russian Federation. Identify weapons which is shipped and which is used by gunmen, and to stop those supplies from Russian Federation. Possible amnesty to those who did not participate in heavy crimes, and exchange hostages, and to develop adaptation program for residents in Luhansk and the Donetsk region with packages of economic, social programs to build housing and infrastructure facilities, to create jobs and programs for development of families. The next point, to have a broad dialogue with the representatives of the public in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, including representatives of big industries, of big business, trade unions, mines, intellects, and universities, and other representatives, and representatives of political parties with different positions, with a clear format about signing a memorandum on peace and to work together on rebuilding the region and to harmonize the society, with a position as to counteraction against the terrorists, fighting terrorists and separatists on the territory of those regions. There was a forum of resistance to terrorist and extremist movements. And the next point, on operational level, very briefly, we should develop a new operational staff by the President of Ukraine with leadership, which is responsible for intelligence, with different agencies to disorganize those armed groups and mercenaries and leaders of political structures, and to develop conditions for citizens of Ukraine to give up weapons, and and amnesty for those who did not commit a crime. New ATO should have military operations as to mercenaries, foreign mercenaries, infiltrators and bandits and leaders of those groups that terrorize people and destroy buildings and infrastructure, business and infrastructure. To reduce the number of victims, we should agree on the framework of that big roadmap with Russia, Europe, on corridors for those mandatory citizens of Russia to move back to the territory and to take them to responsibility according to legislation of Russia. They don't recognize them, they should take them back. After the first stage of regulation of the situation, we should invite to Donetsk and Lugansk regions representatives from EU, UN, OSCE to monitor the situation and to get to develop additional plan for peace and stability in the region, long-term peace. I underline that these activities practically must be done simultaneously, and the emphasis is on the position of EU countries and Russian Federation and Ukraine in order to neutralize Russian Federation. Putin told to leaders of Australia, US, and Europe, and that he is ready to support the peaceful process. We consider this peaceful process on the level of Russia, Ukraine, and EU countries without the involvement of leaders of terrorist groups. Nobody will have negotiations with terrorism, but this is the model of stabilization, and this is the model to force Russian Federation to meet the commitments they have. Under the control, the roadmap, and includes everyday steps of how to destroy terrorists or how to take them back, and we should control border, and all efforts should be used, and we should not stop operational means of military operations against the terrorists and mercenaries in the region. If we involve such a format, and if we stop the border, if we close the border, if we organize people, they show that they're against terrorism, and that's 95% of people are against terrorism. And if we force the majority of gunmen, mercenaries, people can force them to get out, and special groups and who are very professional, and they can neutralize leaders of those groups, and they can disorient those groups. And that is a precondition for a new stage of stabilization and rebuilding of Donbass. For that, I want to say, and the forum, our forum, economists and lawyers, we developed the whole model, how to rehabilitate people, to stabilize, how to monitor, and also how to run reforms, how to rebuild the infrastructure and housing assets. And we're working on how to supply water on that issue, and not through pipelines, but through renovation and new directions, like how to build the infrastructure and how to develop a business, and that means new jobs for that region. And there should be not only government programs, but also investments can come, and that's a good chance to renew business and to give the future for that region, but on new economic, political, and democratic conditions. That's that package of issues which will provide future for the next Donbass region. And it will harmonize relations with Kiev, because not only government will be involved, but all companies, centers, humanitarian groups will be involved. And that's the future which will be after military phase of in the East. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions to Mr. Malomuzh? My general, tell me, please. I'm head of the special unit Viking. Yesterday they captured 4 people from Maidan by separatists in Donetsk Oblast. Is it possible to release them? And I gave my telephone number to separatists to contact me, but I do not know about their destiny. There's another communication about a month ago. It all started. We have to liberate 6 people in Luhansk Oblast who are now in custody of traitors from the police, Ukrainian police, and the 17th pretrial detention center. After this conversation, you give me the particulars. We use informants, the special means, and other operative actions. There are different extremists and different commands. Stock, Russia, and we have to identify who's in charge. We started that in the Crimea, where we liberated our military officers. So there we had special Russian special force and local mercenaries. Now we have about 12 groups of different orientations, some of them under general command and some of them autonomous or relatively controllable. So we have to start to make this more effective. There are different channels that they try, and we have to identify the person who is really in charge. Ukraine channel, tell us, please. Mr. Nalyvaichenko said yesterday that there was arrest of high-rank military officers in the anti-terrorist operations staff and other structures. At the tactical level, they were apprehended, a couple of people, in different places, and in the ATO area in Kharkiv, Mykola, Odessa Oblast, Kherson Oblast, and the city of Kiev. But this is the level, the general level, former military officers of the medium level. They worked for Russia or for Luhansk and Donetsk, so-called People's Republics. They are saboteurs or spies or accomplices who help such operations for money. They do it mostly for money. At the level of high command, there's this issue of 3 high-ranking generals and colonels, and we are now looking to the issue. I wouldn't be very hasty with the conclusions here. I used to be in charge of the Department of Counterintelligence and Protection Against Terrorism, so we cannot do that within 3 days. We have to investigate this thoroughly and then present the real information. This is preliminary information. Spilno TV. I wanted to ask you, you said that you need professionals for the general staff. 3 days ago, we talked to one person who was who called herself Anna Kolenko. She said that she's counsel to Minister of Defense. She said that she had background in theater, in arts. She was an actress, good-looking. Is she that kind of professional that you were referring to? We need real professionals who can be useful. You tackled a very topical issue. And at that point, the acting president, then the incumbent president, raised the issue of reshuffling in the Ministry of Defense, Secret Service of Ukraine, or the people with positions of generals and in peaceful time, but through corruption very often, and in the Ministry of Interior also. So that was the last period. We lost the Crimea. Now we have the same problems, and you were right. In the general staff, they have to be colonels that never smelled any powder, and we had tens of them as consultants. We are talking about heads of general staff, operational commands, operational divisions of special services, secret service under the President of Ukraine, with on a daily basis 79, 72, 25, and 45, the brigades that were devastated. Or for 2.5 months, we were making presentations here on the 28 hours combat, the border guards, nobody took the responsibility, nobody signed the decree or the order, and they were perished or had to retreat. And so I am putting this to the leadership of the state. Urgently, we have to reshuffle military command and create some general staff to solve the situation. Can guarantee that, Mykola. I see TV Yuri Mendel. Recently, we talked to some customs officers and border guards at Chonga. They start their duty much earlier. They take shifts on a daily basis, and there's big concentration of forces with specific units, and there's some shooting, some fire. Would like to know the situation in that area. Is it really that the border of the Crimea and the Kherson Oblast, there's concentration of forces with Grad? We are talking about Kherson region. Yes, this is true. We made that field visit yesterday. Our representatives, our proxies and intelligence now coordinated, and there's this new group and quick response, rapid response, military machinery in Grad. And I would like to tell you about Chernihiv, Sumy, Donetsk, Luhansk Oblast, and also the sea activation in all the areas. And another point I would like to tell you about it, it's in the plans, in the scenario. It's if we do not do peaceful talks, but with participation of Luhansk and Donetsk, so-called People's Republics, and blows with Grad and other from the border of Russia, and with the more casualties, and this is about talks with the militaries, and we cannot allow for that. But otherwise, we can have a concentration of such forces and the intervention as Chernihiv. You know that they're ready, they're painted as peacekeepers. Even OSCE people were invited, UN people were invited, but that will be the Russian force. So I'm talking about the European Union leader, Putin, Poroshenko, and the EU leaders. They should have this ad hoc meeting and block the border and the roadmap for neutralization of such action. The most important things, and that will then will neutralize it here. That's very important. Sorry, we have no time for continuation of that. We'll be glad to see you again in the Ukraine Crisis Media Center. Thank you very much. Our next speaker in 2 minutes.